When people were talking with such honesty and sincerity, I was thinking, well, how was a safe space created in such a short time? We had a short time yesterday, and already this morning by 9 o'clock when this check-in started, everybody felt very comfortable and safe. And I know that it's because of the vibrations that all of you shared together last night, but also the vibrations that have accumulated in this house over a period of time. And so I'm very pleased that magic can happen, even though we've only been back here in residence a very short time, but there's still magic in these walls. I want to firstly talk about the whole subject of balance, because it came up in several different situations. And it's interesting that most of us would always say that our work, our professional life is major priority, and then we also have family responsibilities, then we also have to look at ourselves. Well, can I turn it the other way around and make it a pyramid, in which at the peak of the pyramid is myself? And that's not being selfish, but it's the right priority to have. Why? If I don't care for my inner world and the inner being within, however much I try, I'm not going to be able to fulfill my family responsibilities. Whether it's physical health, whether it's emotional health, whether it's mental or spiritual health, how can I possibly fulfill the demands that a young family or a teenage family make on me? Once they've left the nest and flown away, it's a little bit different, but of course the responsibility continues even then. But can you imagine a young mother and no possibility of recharging the inner battery because she doesn't know how? Or a young father who feels, sometimes I'm very surprised, it's an indication of my age, when I see kids 4 and 5 and I look at their parents and the parents just look as if they're teenagers themselves. And I was looking at a lot of people over the last few days because we had a festival that we call Raksha Bandhan, the festival of love, the festival of friendship. It can be interpreted in many ways, but in particular the festival of God's protection and blessings. And I had the opportunity of meeting on a personal level a few thousand people, I think. It went on for 8 days in London and prior to that 2 days here in Oxford, so very powerful. So whether it's a mother or father or however old the children are, if I myself haven't sorted out the tensions and the struggles within my own inner world, the messages I'm giving to the children are very mixed. And the role model that I should be for my children is really not happening. I get upset with them, I get angry with them, then I get angry with myself for getting angry with them. And so things go a little bit out of sync. But if I've given myself the priority, not the luxury, but the priority of time for myself, for my own inner world, and I'll come back to that in just a few minutes or so. But then I have the capacity to deal with not just what life is bringing at me, but also to my children. I don't know what's going to happen to them in the next hour. Literally, it's become such a world in which you can't send children out on their own anymore, at least not in the UK, and especially not in London. But you can't always be with them to protect them. So there has to be some inner awareness that gives me faith and trust and confidence, and I'm able to instill in those little ones or bigger ones the same trust and confidence with which they can have the the capacity also to take care of themselves in challenging times. I've given a few examples, but lots more, of course, and most of you are parents, so you know all the things that you struggle with when you're dealing with the struggles that your children are having. And then, if I myself don't have my own inner reserves, how do I perform at work? And a lot of our work today is with collaboration, not just me alone making decisions, but the world is so complex and situations are so complicated that where I stand and what I see as one person is just not enough to give me a true picture. And so we're used to working now in teams, collaboratively. And yes, finally, the decision comes to the captain of the ship. But the information that's garnered from many directions is absolutely vital. And so, in order to be able to manage at work with all the colleagues and all the uncertainties of the world, I need to have spiritual power, which also means to be able to refine my own state of intuition. Many years ago, it wasn't recently, it was some years ago, I was reading how the top leaders that have shown in Fortune 500, all of them were asked the question, what do you use to make your decisions? And all of them said, my intuition. They needed the information, they needed all the technology, they needed all of that. But what came to the crunch was finally their gut feeling, their intuition. And the more I can refine my intuition, and that's not a physical process, it's very much a spiritual process of being able to sort out what is negative and waste and what is ordinary from my thinking, and refining it to a point where I know that it's clean, it's pure, it's noble, not just for my benefit, definitely not for my benefit, but more benefit for everyone, and not even just the team, but for maybe the public at large. And so I'm seeing how when I keep this pyramid in this way, making time for myself, making time for my family, because if I don't, when I need their support and cooperation, I'm going to fall flat on my face because I haven't invested myself in them. I need to give them time and attention and love, but not to the expense of the time I give to myself. And so I know it sounds easy, but I really believe it works. So making time for myself, then making time for my family, but also maybe I extend it further out than just family, making time for relationships with everyone. And that includes my work team, my colleagues. Because again, if it's only that it's, shall we do this, shall we do that, shall we do the other, and finish, there's no connection between people. And there's going to be issues of competition, there's going to be issues of conflict maybe. But if there's a relationship that's been established with the individuals with whom I work, then even if they have to stay beyond 5 o'clock in the evening, they'll all chip in and they'll all say, it's fine, we need to do this together. And so relationships make the output of the work more efficient and much, much better than it could have been otherwise. And so it's funny how when we spend a moment thinking about it, it makes a lot of sense. But then when we're out there on the field of action, whether I see it as a battlefield or whether I see it as a game. And it's much nicer to see it as a game or the play, whichever image you choose. But sometimes we treat it like a battlefield. And every Monday morning we think, oh my goodness, I'm going to go out onto that battlefield again. And then it does become a battle. It becomes a battle with myself and a battle with everyone else. But can I turn it around? And it's a beautiful game. It's a beautiful dance. And so we can dance together and enjoy each moment together, which I believe was one of the main aspects of life also. And so work doesn't suffer if I give time to my colleagues. A smile, a word, just a moment together, even just a glance of appreciation. That's all it takes. And yes, a little bit more time than that. But if I put it in that sequence, then things work out very well. And what I've found is that in any situation, if I'm trying to fix things here and here and here, rather than that, if I spend a little bit of time in introspection, you'll get used to this 3 minutes of silence every hour, and maybe you'll even get addicted to it, and you'll want to do it back home. You can have a watch that gives you a bleep. You can have it on your computer. There's various apps that help you with this. But peace pause, peace pulse, different things. But it really then means in that moment going inwards, I have the opportunity to reflect. You know how when you've finished one bit of your work and you have to walk down a corridor to do the next bit of your work, it used to be a moment of pause in which you could just reflect on what's just happened, and you could also think about what you need to do next. But if instead of that, I decide to plug things into my ears and listen to the messages that have accumulated in the last hour or so, I'm not giving myself any space to reflect at all. So self, relationships, and then the task. And so I think that helps a lot with trying to juggle with all the things that we need to do. And if I'm thinking about it in this way, not only am I prioritizing things in this sequence, but also in terms with family. What is the priority that's needed here? Maybe we don't go out together for dinner. Maybe we actually need to sit at home and just have a chat together. I know one of the tragedies of COVID, many aspects, but one of the benefits of COVID, many people said, we had to stay together. Nobody had to go out in the morning, nobody had to go out in the evening, a lot of time to spend with family. And I also saw the downside of that, of course, in different ways, but it was good. And so now can I make time for all of this? And when I'm focused in terms of my meditation and my own spiritual awareness, then really, truly, the work that would sometimes take you 4 hours, you can accomplish in half the time. Literally half the time. Simply because you've learned to focus, and that helps hugely. And where I'm distracted, of course it's going to take longer and longer and longer, and it'll never get done. The other thing that came up that I want to talk about a little is a sense of responsibility. And all of you are very responsible people. But within that, yes, first the responsibility to the self came up this morning. But also, whatever responsibility I have, I go part of the way to fulfill it, doing what it is I understand I need to do, and doing it as honestly and as accurately as I can, with sincerity, with love. But there's also, I think, an aspect in which I have to trust that there are other forces in the universe, and whether it's the drama of life, whether it's the source up above, whether it's the good work that I've done in the past that's going to kick in, and I believe all these energies do work, that's also going to take care of it. I've done the best that I can, and the rest, I just have to have the faith and trust that it's going to work out. It's like with physical health. Let me do whatever it is I can. Eat well, sleep right, and think right. But beyond that, still things can happen. And I can't blame this one or that one or the other one. But what I can do is, through that whole span, just keep a very positive, powerful attitude. And the healing that kicks in through this is amazing. I've seen that happen so often. I'm responsible for my health, and I'll do the best that I can, and I won't ignore the signs that keep coming up. But then beyond that, if something does go wrong, then I have to ask myself, well, what are the lessons to learn from this? Maybe it's just giving me time for myself. Maybe it's just teaching me to look at life differently, to realize that I'm not indispensable. Many things to learn from that. So I can carry a certain amount of responsibility, but I can't let responsibility weigh on my shoulders to the extent that it paralyzes me in decision-making, or it creates fear in me and fear in others also. So yes, to work with love, to do everything that I do with that love, not out of I have to. I think that change of consciousness is also very important. Not just Dadi Janki, but we've been fortunate to have a leadership of many Dadis. When the organization started, Manda had just a few minutes to share you about our history, and I'm not going to give you the whole history now. That would take up the full session. But the vision that Brahma Baba had was of a world of justice and equality. And the first thing that struck him was that there needs to be equality in terms of gender balance. And at that time, in northwest India, which today is Pakistan, Sindh in particular, women were second-class citizens. And he just turned it around completely. And he said, well, affirmative action means women as teachers and leaders. And our constitution till today states women in charge. And so since the early days, it's been women in charge. And I think it's worked well. And that's not just because I have this identity at this point, but it has worked. And I've had the good fortune of knowing most of those women leaders. We have great men leaders also, by the way. Yogesh happens to be one of them. He looks after our centers in Turkey, but also supports the whole Mediterranean region. So, why I was remembering the Dadis, and I went off into the story, but the Dadis carried a huge amount of responsibility, but always stayed light with it because of their faith and trust, but also because whatever they did was an act of love. It was never that they were supposed to be doing this, or they had to do this, or somebody expected them to do it. And so sometimes I'd look at them and think, do you really need to give time to this? And I didn't challenge them, but it was a question that came in my mind. And a little while later, I'd see the impact that it had had on the people they'd been with. And it was absolutely the love with which they'd done whatever that then brought them a huge amount of support and cooperation. And so doing things with love, whether it's cooking food with love, cleaning with love, or talking to an individual or talking to 1,000 people, just doing it with love means the responsibility is not heavy, it's not a burden. I want to go back to that first step of sorting out the struggles inside. And I'm thinking about the situation where the biggest struggle within is usually between the conscience and the heart. And so we're used to hearing things like follow your heart, but yet what about the conscience? And so how do I come to a balance of this and align these two together? And as I understand spiritual laws more and more, then I understand that, yes, cause and effect is huge. Everything is cause and effect. Everything in the universe is cause and effect, actually. And so when I understand this, then my conscience is a guiding factor that will ultimately tell me what is the spiritual law that governs any situation or any relationship. And I have to bring my heart into alignment with that, so that my feelings also come to comprehend and become peaceful and accept that the law is the final thing. The law not on an external level, but the law of cause and effect, which in other words you could also call karma. So people know the word karma, but they don't always know what it means. But basically it's cause and effect, good or bad, negative or positive. And so my conscience tells me what the law is usually. Yes, if you ignore your conscience long enough, again and again, then it stops speaking to you. And there we have a problem. And we see the results of that in today's world. And so the first step is really to get in touch with the inner self and allow the conscience to awaken. And then the heart that has been maybe frozen has become maybe like hard stone because of so many challenges and incidents and situations that we've had to face. But turning inwards also means that the heart begins to melt and soften and comes back into alignment with what my conscience is now telling me. And so, time for the self, a little bit of spiritual study, understanding how these things work, makes a huge difference. And the battles inside begin to calm down, and the soul's able to be at peace with itself. And once I come to that state of inner peace, then I'm going to deal with everything outside with peace. You know, your child may throw a tantrum, but it's with love that you can calm the child down. It's not with anger. It's not going to be with impatience. It's going to be with patience and love. And so in everything, love then becomes the force that can work, but only when it's aligned with what my conscience is saying. So let me stop there, but that in a way is one of the things that spirituality helps me with in terms of dealing with all the upheaval that's going on around me.